The hangar of Shinoral Prime was a cathedral of war. Its ceilings arched like the ribs of some great machine beast, every steel beam humming faintly with a weight of power conduits running through them. Light panels cast a cold, clinical glow across the polished floors, where lines of armored recruits stood in formation. Hundreds of them, from a dozen species, all waiting for the next order. To most, the atmosphere was one of anticipation. To her, it was scrutiny. Second Lieutenant Kyra Hale knelt at the edge of the formation, rifle cradled across her knees, fingers moving with deliberate precision along the scope mount. She knew every groove, every screw, every adjustment of the weapon, and her breathing fell into the same rhythm she had practiced since cadet days on Earth. Inhale, exhale, rest, squeeze. Not one motion wasted. Around her, alien recruits whispered and chuckled, their voices a chorus of disdain that echoed in her ears despite the size of the chamber. They wore sleek exosuits and carried rifles bristling with glowing conduits, weapons that could tear through reinforced armor with a single plasma discharge. To them, her matte black ballistic rifle with its hand-tightened modifications looked like a relic, a museum piece dragged onto a battlefield. Humans, one insectoid muttered in a clacking tongue that Kyra had already learned to understand, always bringing toys to real wars. Another, a hulking saurian with scaled arms crossed, snorted. Perhaps she thinks the enemy will die of boredom watching her reload. The laughter rippled outward. Kyra did not respond. Words had no place here. Her focus was on the subtle calibration of her optic, the minute adjustments that others would not notice, but which meant everything to her. Each breath aligned her mind with the rifle, steadying not only her hands, but the tension crawling up her spine. She was used to mockery. Every Earthborn recruit was. Humanity's history was one of near extinction, clawing its way to relevance long after the greater galactic powers had established dominance. To the others, humans were underdogs tolerated only because of political necessity. Still, she felt the sting. Not for herself. She could endure the jibes, but for the generations of human soldiers who had fought with steel, powder, and patience long before plasma fire lit the stars. They deserved better than to be dismissed as primitives. Her grip tightened on the rifle stock. Movement stirred the ranks. The instructor was arriving. The recruits straightened, the laughter swallowed in an instant. Heavy footsteps reverberated as Commander Valen entered, a towering figure encased in obsidian armor that hissed faintly with each step. His visor glowed with a predatory blue, reflecting coldly against the polished floor. Unlike the recruits, his silence carried weight. Authority radiated from him like heat. Kyra rose to her feet, snapping to attention, rifle still clutched firmly. Valen's gaze swept across the assembled warriors, lingering briefly on the most vocal aliens, then passing over her without pause. Or so it seemed. Recruits, his voice boomed, augmented by the hangar's systems until it seemed the walls themselves spoke. You stand on the threshold of proving whether you are worthy of this alliance. Here, we forge soldiers into weapons, or we discard the weak as waste. There will be no excuses. There will be no second chances. A chorus of affirmations thundered back, each species echoing in their own tongue. Kyra's voice was quieter than most, but steady, caring only for herself. Valen paced the line, inspecting rifles, armor, and posture. He paused occasionally to correct stance or bark criticism. When he reached Kyra, the hangar seemed to narrow around her. She braced herself, expecting ridicule for her choice of weapon. Instead, Valen leaned down slightly, visor inches from her face, gaze fixed not on her eyes but on the rifle. His armored hand extended, but he did not touch the weapon. He watched her hands instead, the way she rested her palm, the way her breathing slowed before she locked the bolt into place. For a heartbeat, silence pressed heavier than any insult. Then, so quietly that only she could hear, he spoke. Only snipers breathe like that. Kyra blinked. The words were not mocking. They were an acknowledgement, recognition from a man who had commanded countless battles. Her chest tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. She did not nod. She did not smile. She simply breathed. Inhale. Exhale. Valen straightened without another word and continued down the line. The recruits glanced at her, some frowning, others sneering, all curious why the commander had wasted even a second on the human with the antique rifle. Kyra ignored them. The whisper lingered, heavy as a promise. The formation dissolved when the speech concluded. Recruits ordered to ready themselves for the coming exercises. As the hangar erupted into motion, armor clattering, weapons humming, voices raised in competition, Kyra remained still for a moment longer. She could still feel the weight of Valen's words settling into her bones. Mockery she understood. Silence she had endured. But recognition, that was dangerous. Recognition meant expectation. She rose, slinging the rifle across her back, and joined the others streaming toward the equipment bays. The Saurian who had mocked her earlier sneered again, muttering something about lucky pity. She let pass. She had no need to waste her breath. The galaxy's armies might have laughed at her rifle setup, but she had just been told something that none of them had heard. Only snipers breathe like that. It was not praise. It was not comfort. It was a challenge. And Kyra Hale did not intend to fail. The hangar doors groaned open ahead, revealing the training grounds beyond, vast and treacherous. The next phase awaited, and she could already feel the weight of every watching eye. She adjusted her sling, steadied her breath, and walked forward into the light. The training grounds stretched like an artificial battlefield carved into the bones of the station itself. Towering walls reconfigured with each drill, shifting into alleys, sniper nests, and shattered plazas where holographic debris glimmered faintly under the overhead lights. Drones buzzed above, their lenses recording every movement, every mistake. The air smelled faintly of ozone and lubricants, an atmosphere designed not to comfort but to sharpen. Recruits gathered in their assigned squads, armor plates clicking into place, weapons humming with energy. Boasts echoed through the chamber, alien tongues blending into a cacophony of bravado. Kyra adjusted the strap of her rifle and let the noise wash over her. She didn't need to outshout them. She needed only to breathe. Her squad consisted of 3 species besides herself. The insectoid who had mocked her earlier, a saurian with scales the color of rust, and one of the other human soldiers from Earth, Corporal Ramirez. He flashed her a grin as they took their positions. His rifle was standard issue energy-based, efficient but unremarkable. She could tell by the way he carried it that he had little patience for long engagements. He was a sprinter, not a stalker. The insectoid sneered when he saw her kneeling to test her scope. "Do not fall behind, human. I will not carry your corpse." Kyra ignored the jab. Words would not change the outcome. What mattered was where she placed her shots. A shrill tone blared across the grounds, signaling the start of the simulation. Walls shifted, locking into a maze of barricades and elevated walkways. Targets appeared, humanoid constructs glowing faintly with red outlines, programmed to move, dodge, and retaliate. Energy fire erupted instantly as squads charged forward, neon bolts flashing like a storm of lightning. The hangar transformed into chaos. Kyra did not move with the initial rush. She slipped sideways instead, eyes scanning for high ground. Ramirez hesitated, then covered her flank as she scrambled up a staircase to a broken balcony. The insectoid cursed behind them, accusing her of cowardice, but his voice was drowned by the shriek of plasma fire. From the balcony, Kyra exhaled slowly and settled her cheek against the stock. The world narrowed into a tunnel through her scope. Targets darted across alleys, taking cover, returning fire. Her squad blazed wildly, energy bolts sizzling against barriers. Each shot was loud, bright, and imprecise. Her finger brushed the trigger. Inhale, pause, exhale, squeeze. The rifle kicked softly against her shoulder. A target collapsed instantly, head dissolved into sparks. Another breath, another squeeze, and a second went down. She shifted minutely, watching angles others missed. Her shots came slow, deliberate, each a punctuation mark in the storm. Down below, Ramirez barked in surprise as enemies that had pinned his advance suddenly fell. "Nice shooting, Hale." She did not answer. Words wasted breath. Breath steadied aim. Across the battlefield, squads competed not just against the constructs but against each other. Energy fire lit up the maze, some recruits burning through their reserves in minutes. The Saurian from her squad roared and charged into the open, plasma rifle vomiting bolts until the weapon overheated, leaving him exposed. A construct's beam slammed into his armor, dropping him to the floor in simulated death. The insectoid cursed him, then cursed Kyra when she didn't leap into the fray. Another exhale. Another shot. The construct targeting the insectoid folded before it could fire. Kyra tracked left, lined up the next target, and felled it before it cleared cover. The scoreboard projected above the field flickered constantly, updating with kills, accuracy, and efficiency. At first, no one noticed her. The chaos was too thick. But as her shots stacked, each clean, each final, the difference became visible. One by one, the squads began realizing that the quiet human was skewing the entire balance of the exercise. On the far side of the grounds, another Saurian bellowed in disbelief when he saw his score overtaken. That human? Impossible. Kyra blocked out the noise. She focused on her breathing, her scope, the rhythm of targets moving and falling. She conserved ammunition, her magazine still half full while most energy rifles sputtered dangerously low. Then the constructs escalated. Heavier drones emerged, armed with rotary plasma cannons. Squads panicked, pouring fire in every direction. The insectoid screeched for cover. Ramirez shouted for focus, and Kyra steadied her aim. She didn't go for the body. She went for the joints, the seams where armor was weakest. One shot severed a drone stabilizer, sending it crashing into a wall. Another pierced a glowing vent, igniting a feedback explosion that took out two more. Ramirez whooped as he advanced. "She's cutting them apart. Keep her covered." The insectoid said nothing now. He just stayed low and followed the line Kyra carved through the battlefield. Minutes later, the shrill tone blared again, signaling the end of the simulation. The battlefield dissolved into silence, constructs vanishing in bursts of light, walls retracting back into the hangar's recesses. Recruits slumped in exhaustion, armor steaming, weapons drained. Above them, the scoreboard stabilized and froze. Kyra's name sat at the top, not just of her squad, but of the entire exercise. Few shots fired, highest accuracy, most decisive eliminations. The silence that followed was heavier than the Mockery had ever been. Eyes turned toward her, some narrowed in disbelief, others wide in uneasy recognition. Ramirez clapped her on the shoulder with a grin, but even his expression carried a new weight of respect. The insectoid avoided her gaze entirely. Commander Valen stepped forward from the observation deck, armor gleaming under the lights. His voice rolled across the hangar like thunder. This simulation was not about firepower. It was about discipline. Most of you failed. He paused, visor settling directly on Kyra. One of you did not. The recruits shifted, whispers swelling again, but the tone had changed. No longer laughter. No longer derision. Something sharper, something edged with respect and fear. Valen's words echoed in Kyra's mind as she lowered her rifle. Only snipers breathe like that. She said nothing, her face unreadable, but inside her chest her pulse beat steady and cold. Recognition had deepened. Expectation had sharpened. And she knew this was only the beginning. The commander's final words sealed the silence. "Tomorrow, we test you against more than holograms." The Barretts were loud that night. Armor plates clattered as recruits slammed them down for cleaning. Voices raised in a dozen languages, each boasting about the day's battles or arguing over what had gone wrong. Laughter carried sharp edges, and frustration smoldered in the corners of the room. Kyra sat quietly on her bunk, rifle disassembled across her lap, tools spread in precise order. Her hands moved with ritualistic patience, each piece checked, cleaned, and returned to its place. She let the noise swirl around her, never acknowledging it. Ramirez dropped onto the bunk across from her, shaking his head. You know, Hale, I think you scared the hell out of half the station today. Kyra didn't look up. Good. He chuckled. That's not the answer I was expecting. She reassembled the bolt, sliding it home with a soft click. They mock what they don't understand. Fear is the first step toward respect. On the far side of the room, the Saurian who had taunted her earlier was nursing a bruised ego. He kept shooting her dark looks, muttering to others about human trickery. The insectoid avoided her altogether, his usual clacking commentary absent. The silence from him was almost satisfying, but admiration was a double-edged blade. The scoreboard had shifted every perception of her. Some now studied her with hungry eyes, eager to learn how she had pulled it off. Others saw her as a rival to be broken. Valen's words had carved a line, and she was standing alone on one side of it. The next morning, the recruits assembled once again in the training grounds. This time, the atmosphere was heavier, sharper. Valen stood before them, visor gleaming like a frozen star. Yesterday, you faced illusions. Today, you face consequence. You will operate in multi-team scenarios with finite resources. Ammunition is limited. Every wasted shot, every reckless move brings simulated death. If you are careless, you will be eliminated before the mission concludes. The squads murmured, unease curling through their ranks. Kyra checked her magazine, knowing each round would matter more than ever. Ramirez caught her eye, nodding with silent trust. The simulation began with a thunderclap of alarms, and the battlefield shifted into a ruined cityscape. Towering structures rose half-collapsed, streets littered with holographic debris, shadows deep and treacherous. Enemy constructs appeared again, this time in larger numbers, programmed to coordinate, flank, and exploit mistakes. Her squad advanced cautiously. Ramirez provided covering fire. The insectoid scuttled along walls, and the Saurian took point with his plasma rifle recharged overnight. Kyra moved slower, eyes always lifted toward vantage points, her rifle steady against her shoulder. At first, the others dismissed her caution. The Saurian charged into the open, blasting down constructs with roaring defiance. Ramirez covered his flank, tried to keep up. Kyra spotted the trap before it closed, a drone rising from the rubble, cannon spinning. She fired once, and the Saurian's death marker blinked off his chest just before the construct could land its shot. The Saurian turned, surprise flickering across his reptilian features, but he said nothing. Words weren't needed. The battle intensified. Constructs poured through alleys, hurting recruits into choke points. Squads panicked, weapons blazing until ammo meters dropped into the red. Kyra stayed measured, firing only when she had to, placing each shot where it would shift momentum. Ramirez learned quickly, conserving his bursts, relying on her precision to break the enemy's advance. As the minutes bled into chaos, it became clear that survival hinged not on firepower, but on restraint. Recruits who had mocked patience were now cursing their own empty weapons. Some tried scavenging from fallen comrades, others charged recklessly into melee, only to be cut down by programmed drones. Kyra's squad held position longer than most, anchored by her overwatch. The insectoid, once scornful, began following her directions without argument. When she pointed toward a rooftop, he climbed it. When she told him to hold fire, he waited. His survival depended on her rhythm, and he knew it. Even the Saurian grudgingly began to fall in line, his bravado tempered by the sting of near death. The battle reached its apex when the simulation unleashed armored juggernauts, towering constructs bristling with cannons and shields. Squads scattered in panic, shouts rising as recruits fell one after another. Kyra steadied her breath, calculating weak points. She directed Ramirez to draw fire, the insectoid to flank, and the Saurian to cover their rear. She aimed for vents, for exposed joints, for glowing seams where shields flickered. Each shot slowed the juggernaut until her team swarmed it, coordinated as if they had trained together for years. The machine collapsed in a burst of simulated fire. For a moment, the field fell quiet. Then Valen's voice boomed from above. Observe. Efficiency. patience, control. This is the discipline that survives. Recruits turned their eyes again, not just to her, but to the squad that had followed her lead. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some of the strongest had fallen, yet the human with the relic rifle endured. And not only endured, she commanded. Kyra lowered her weapon, exhaling slowly, her pulse calm despite the adrenaline surging in her veins. She had not asked for leadership, yet it had taken root around her. The insectoid nodded silently in her direction. The Saurian grunted in grudging acknowledgement, and Ramirez gave her the same grin as before, this time edged with pride. But the whispers of respect carried unease too. Those who had mocked her now felt threatened. She could see it in their eyes, an unspoken calculation of whether her rise meant their fall. Recognition was no longer a whisper. It was a beacon. When the simulation ended, the recruits were dismissed back to the hangar. Armor clanged. Voices filled the air again, but the tone had changed. Mockery had vanished. Respect, fear, resentment, all mingled into a silence heavier than noise. Kyra cleaned her rifle once more, her hands steady despite the storm around her. She thought of Earth, of the old doctrines her instructors had drilled into her, lessons older than plasma rifles and starships. Breathe steady. Wait. One shot, one kill. Those lessons had brought her this far, and now they threatened to set her apart in ways she had not sought. As she slid the final piece of her weapon into place, Valen's voice echoed across the barracks, cutting through the noise. Tomorrow, you face a true battlefield. Not simulation, not illusion. You will fight against living enemies who will not hesitate to end you. And there will be no reset. The room fell silent. Recruits stiffened, glances flickering in nervous recognition. Some trembled, others bristled. Kyra simply inhaled, exhaled, and set her rifle aside. The challenge had been spoken. Tomorrow, every breath would matter. The shuttle's engines roared as it descended through the atmosphere of a barren moon. The recruits sat strapped in, armor sealed, weapons checked one last time. For many, the silence was unbearable. Nervous claws tapped metal plates, tails lashed against the deck, mandibles clicked in agitation. Kyra sat motionless, rifle resting across her knees, her breathing steady. Inhale, exhale, rest. She could feel the tension in the air like a storm pressing against the hull. Ramirez broke the silence with a low voice. So this isn't a sim. These things will actually try to kill us. Kyra met his eyes briefly, then returned her gaze to the weapon. Good. That means they'll make mistakes. The Saurian across from her growled. You think like prey, human. A real soldier dominates the field. She slid the bolt into place with a soft click, the sound sharp in the confined shuttle. A real soldier survives the field. Before the Saurian could answer, the shuttle jolted as it broke atmosphere. The pilot's voice crackled over comms. Approaching drop zone. Hostiles confirmed. Multiple war machines active in the ruins. Stand ready. The hatch blew open with a hiss, and heat slammed into them as the squad leapt out onto cracked ground. The ruins of an outpost stretched ahead, jagged walls and twisted metal towers casting long shadows across the red dust. Smoke coiled into the sky from shattered structures. In the distance, a mechanical roar echoed, deep and metallic. Constructs unlike any they had faced before emerged from the haze. These were not training drones. These were rogue war machines, programmed for destruction, their plating scarred from old battles, their weapons still burning with lethal power. The recruits scattered instinctively, energy fire lighting the sky in neon arcs. The ground shook as explosions erupted, dust clouds swallowing entire formations. Screams crackled across comms as recruits fell, some silenced instantly, others dragged into cover by squad mates. Kyra dropped to one knee, scope snapping into place. She ignored the chaos around her, focusing only on the target ahead. A war machine lumbering between ruins, its cannons spinning toward Ramirez. Her breath slowed. Inhale, pause, exhale, squeeze. The shot cracked, precise and deliberate, striking the machine's sensor. It reeled, fire spraying wide, and Ramirez ducked into cover. "Got your back," Kyra murmured, more to herself than to him. The Saurian roared and charged forward, blasting with both hands. His weapon overheated within seconds, and he barely dodged the machine's retaliation. Kyra tracked its exposed joint and fired again, toppling it in a burst of flame. The Saurian glanced back, his sneer gone, replaced by something grudging and quiet. Respect without words. The battle raged on. Machines poured from the ruins, their tactics coordinated, forcing the recruits into desperation. Bright weapons drained quickly, leaving soldiers scrambling for options. Kyra moved like a shadow, her every step purposeful, conserving ammunition as though each bullet weighed the fate of her squad. Where others fired wildly, she waited. Where others panicked, she breathed. Her precision turned the tide in pockets of resistance. She cut down snipers hidden in towers, dismantled turrets before they could rip squads apart, and struck commanders whose signals kept machines advancing in unison. Each time she fired, chaos bent slightly toward order. Recruits began unconsciously falling into her rhythm, firing when she directed, holding when she held. Ramirez covered her flank faithfully, his bursts timed with her shots. The insectoid climbed walls at her signal, ambushing machines from above. Even the Saurian matched his charges to her cover fire, his aggression no longer reckless, but calculated under her invisible command. Still, the machines pressed hard. One by one, squads fell until only fragments remained. The battlefield burned with smoke and neon fire, air thick with the acrid sting of melted metal. Above it all, Commander Valen watched from an observation craft, his visor reflecting the carnage below. Then the juggernaut appeared. It rose from the ruins like a fortress on legs, towering above the battlefield. Its armor was blackened but unbroken, its cannons humming with lethal energy. The recruits froze at the sight, morale collapsing in a wave of dread. Even Ramirez swore under his breath. How the hell are we supposed to stop that? Kyra's breathing slowed until the noise of the battlefield faded into silence in her mind. She studied the juggernaut, tracing its movement, its timing, its vulnerabilities. She saw it not as a monster, but as a puzzle. She dropped prone on a broken wall, scope trained on a seam just above the core. Her squad formed instinctively around her. Ramirez drew fire with sharp bursts. The insectoid scrambled to disable a flank cannon. The Saurian hurled debris to distract the machine sensors. Each action created seconds, and each second was all she needed. Her breath narrowed into rhythm. Inhale, exhale, rest. The world funneled into the crosshairs, everything else stripped away. She squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck true, piercing the seam. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the machine shuddered, sparks spitting from its core, and a thunderous explosion ripped through its chest. The juggernaut collapsed, shaking the ruins as it crashed to the ground. The battlefield stilled. Smoke curled into the sky. Survivors stared in disbelief. Whispers spread through the comms, not of mockery, not even of rivalry, but of awe. Kyra rose slowly, lowering her rifle. Around her, the insectoid bowed his head. The Saurian muttered something in his guttural tongue that carried no scorn, only respect. Ramirez grinned, exhaustion in his eyes, but pride in his voice. You just saved every damn one of us. Above, Valen's voice carried over the comms, steady and resonant. This is the discipline of humanity. While others waste strength and fire, humans wield patience as a weapon. And patience wins wars. The words rolled across the recruits, carving themselves into memory. For Kyra, they were not validation, but confirmation of what she had always known. Breath, patience, precision, these were not relics. They were survival. The surviving recruits gathered in silence as shuttles descended to retrieve them. Many stole glances at her, their expressions a blend of fear and reverence. No one mocked her rifle now. No one dared. The laughter that had followed her since arrival had been replaced by whispers spoken, as if invoking legend. Kyra cleaned her weapon on the return flight, as she always did, Movements calm, ritual intact. Around her, the noise of exhaustion filled the shuttle, but she remained centered, steady. She had not sought glory. She had only breathed, aimed, and fired. Valen's words echoed in her mind, mingling with his first whisper. Only snipers breathe like that. She closed her eyes, letting the rhythm of her breath carry her into silence. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new wars, new mockery from those who forgot what had happened here. She would be ready, because patience was eternal, and patience always endured.